The scent of synthesized dew hung heavy in the Xylosian nursery, a cloying sweetness that made Sergeant Maya Ramirez wrinkle her nose. Not quite unpleasant, but undeniably alien. This was the famed Xylosian larval ward, a place of hushed reverence, where the gelatinous young were meant to develop in controlled, pristine solitude. Now, it was hers. And frankly, it felt less like a sacred chamber, and more like a glorified terrarium designed for exotic garden slugs. Her team, a motley crew of veteran mothers and surprisingly patient dads, exchanged nervous glances. The Xylosians had been clear. Humans possessed unique parental instincts. They needed that. What they didn't know was what those instincts entailed when faced with a squirming, six-limbed blob that seemed determined to sample every non-edible surface in its sterile, glowing enclosure. "All right, listen up," Maya barked, her voice echoing a little too loudly in the silent, shimmering room. "These little guys, they're delicate, but they're also kids. So we treat 'em like kids. We keep 'em safe, we keep 'em stimulated, and for the love of the stars, we make sure they don't ingest the nutrient gel that isn't specifically labeled, larval chow." One of the smaller larvae, a shimmering, translucent mass of wriggling segments, suddenly lunged for a discarded power conduit. "Hey! No! Bad squiggler!" Maya yelled, her hand shooting out to gently bat the larva away. It recoiled, then stared at her with its multiple, unblinking eye stalks. A low, trilling sound, almost like a giggle, emanated from its form, a sound previously unheard by Xylosian scientists. That was the start. Within a single galactic cycle, the serene nursery became a vibrant, chaotic playground. "Tag! You're it!" Staff Sergeant Miller would shout, gently tapping a larva with a soft, glow-tipped stick, sending it scuttling across the padded floor in a bewildered but excited chase. Another human, Specialist Chen, had invented hide-and-seek, much to the initial dismay of the Xylosian overseers who couldn't comprehend why their precious offspring were being stressed by such unpredictable, human-devised movements. The humans taught them games. They told them stories, voices modulated for the larvae's delicate auditory receptors. They even, to the utter horror of the Xylosian adults observing from behind tinted shields, introduced brightly colored, non-toxic toys, spheres, cubes, and squishy constructs that the larvae learned to bat, stack, and even on occasion hurl with surprising accuracy, often at each other. "Stop eating that," became a universal human refrain, often followed by a gentle tug or a firm but kind redirection. The larvae, far from being traumatized, thrived. They grew faster, became more interactive, their trilling giggles filling the once silent chambers with an unprecedented cacophony of joy. Most alarmingly to their biological parents, they became utterly, profoundly obsessed with their human caretakers, seeking their presence above all else. The Xylosian adults watched, their complex sensory organs struggling to process the scene. Their young, previously passive, silent, and entirely predictable, were now boisterous, playful, and distressingly human. The terrifying truth slowly dawned on the alien parents. They hadn't just hired babysitters, they had unleashed an evolutionary catalyst. And humanity, in its raw, unrefined instinct to nurture and to play, had just unknowingly changed an entire species, forever altering the future of the Xylosian Empire. The hum of a million silent nannies, the soothing, rhythmic pulse of automated care systems, had once been the only sound in the Xylosian larval wards. High progenitor Xylar remembered it well. A symphony of perfect order, ensuring optimal, predictable development. Now, that hum was drowned out by something far more unsettling. A cacophony of human laughter, shrill alien trills of pure, unadulterated joy, and the booming pronouncements of, "You're IT," or, "Get back here, you little slimeball." Xylar observed through the reinforced viewing pane, its multifaceted ocular stalks whirring in distress. A human, the one designated Miller, was currently engaged in a frantic chase across the padded floor, not chasing a rogue specimen, but playing with them. Miller would feign clumsy attempts to catch a scuttling larva, then let out a theatrical gasp of defeat as the young Xylosian juked past, emitting a burst of delighted, high-pitched trills. The larva would then purposely dart back, inviting further pursuit. This was not the dignified, solitary development Xylosian young were meant to undergo. This was pandemonium. A carefully orchestrated, joyous pandemonium that was anathema to every Xylosian principle. The data streams confirmed the progenitor's worst fears. Larval metabolic rates were erratic, spiking during play sessions. Their psionic sensitivity, usually a slow, steady growth curve, was now a jagged, unpredictable graph influenced by human emotions. And their attachment metrics? Off the charts. The larvae displayed overt distress, a phenomenon previously unknown in early Xylosian development. If a designated human carer was out of sight for more than 2 Earth Standard minutes, they weren't just being raised, they were being bonded. A deep, emotional connection that threatened to overwrite millennia of biological programming. Xylar's neural network flashed with archived memories of their own larval stages, a cool, nutrient-rich vat, silent growth, periodic assessments by unfeeling mechanical arms. A stark contrast to the current scene. Specialist Chen was teaching a group of larvae to stack soft, glow-in-the-dark rings, her voice a low, encouraging murmur. One particularly boisterous larva had just knocked over the tower, eliciting a playful groan from Chen and a burst of triumphant trills from the larva. The human then ruffled the larva's gelatinous head, a gesture of affection that Xylar found both repulsive and, disturbingly, debactive. The larvae practically preened under the touch, a behavior utterly alien to Xylosian biology. The Xylosian High Council had met daily for the last 3 cycles, each meeting dissolving into a morass of confusion and growing dread. "They are domesticating them," Elder Kreeth had vocalized, its voice quavering, its primary tendrils retracting in dismay. "They are teaching them impropriety. Our young now associate positive reinforcement with physical roughhousing, with loud noises, with constant, demanding interaction. Our traditions of quiet contemplation, of measured growth, are being systematically dismantled." Another council member, Flar, shuddered, its bioluminescent markings flickering with anxiety. The future leaders of our unified systems, will they demand cuddle time before a planetary treaty negotiation? Will they initiate tag during a crucial tactical review? Will they prioritize play over strategic analysis? The absurdity was almost comical, if not for the very real, very terrifying implications. The humans with their parental instincts had not merely babysat, they had imprinted, they had instilled an entirely alien worldview into the very fabric of the next Xylosian generation, warping their perception of order and decorum. The larvae, once placid and predictable, now bristled with an unfamiliar energy, an unpredictable spark. They yearned for noise, for touch, for the wild, illogical games the humans invented. The metallic tang of nutrient paste number 7 hit Staff Sergeant Miller first, even before his eyes registered the dull, shimmering gray-green sludge. It oozed sluggishly from the automated dispenser, settling into segmented troughs that lined the nursery. To the Xylosians, this was peak efficiency. Perfectly measured, nutritionally complete, utterly sterile. To Miller, it looked like a swamp monster's vomit after a particularly bad night. And the larvae were supposed to eat this? "All right, team." Maya's voice cut through the low thrum of the nutrient cycles. "Feeding time. Remember the protocols. Gentle encouragement, minimal spillage, and absolutely no trying to taste it yourselves. I don't care if you think it smells like old gym socks and despair, it's their dinner." Miller sighed, picking up a soft, silicone scoop. The larvae, usually a chaotic swirl of energy, now clustered around their troughs, their multiple eye stalks fixed on the humans. They didn't wait patiently. Oh no. The moment Miller dipped his scoop, a dozen slimy, wriggling forms surged forward, trilling with an almost frantic anticipation. One particularly eager larva, a translucent blob nicknamed Squiggle by the team, tried to climb the trough wall, stretching its frontmost pseudopod towards the paste with an audible slurp. "Whoa there, Squiggle! Not so fast, buddy. Miller chuckled, gently nudging the larva back with the scoop. You gotta wait your turn. See, we're gonna make it an asterisk airplane. He held the scoop aloft, making a soft whoosh sound. Squiggle's eye stalks blinked rapidly. Then it opened its feeding orifice wide, a gaping suction-like maw. Miller guided the airplane into its mouth, and the larva vibrated with pleasure, gulping down the paste with gusto. This was revolutionary. The Zoshin's automated feeders simply squirted the paste directly into the troughs. The larvae consumed it, silently, efficiently. Now, feeding time was an event. Specialist Chen was across the room, making fish noises as she fed another larva, while Private Jenkins hummed a ridiculous little tune, wiggling the spoon like a dancing worm. The larvae responded with unbridled glee, their trills echoing, some even attempting to mimic the human noises with gurgling sounds of their own. "Open wide for the choo-choo train," Jenkins yelled, making a chugga-chugga sound, sending a line of hungry larvae into a mild frenzy. One, bolder than the rest, actually spat a blob of paste back out in its excitement, narrowly missing Jenkins' face. "Hey, no spitting, mister," Jenkins admonished, but there was no real anger, just the exasperated affection of a parent dealing with a messy child. He wiped a pseudopod clean with a prepared sterile cloth, and the larva snuggled against his hand, its gelatinous form vibrating contentedly. High progenitor Xylar, observing from the hidden camera feeds, felt its internal regulatory organs seize. Spitting? Affectionate rebukes? Mimicry? This wasn't feeding. This was some barbaric ritual of bonding. Their carefully calibrated nutrient paste, designed for optimal, silent absorption, was being turned into a tool for fun. The larvae were enjoying it, yes, but at what cost to their inherent Xylosian stoicism? Their future leaders would demand interactive meal experiences, complete with sound effects and playful scolding. The sheer overwhelming humanity of it all was a constant, terrifying assault on Xylosian logic. These humans didn't just feed the young, they fed them chaos, joy, and an insatiable desire for more. And once a child tasted that kind of messy, unpredictable love, there was no going back to quiet efficiency. The faint, almost imperceptible tang of something else started it. Not the synthesized dew, not the metallic nutrient paste. This was sharper, sweeter perhaps, or warmer. It emanated from Specialist Chen, who, in a moment of absent-minded, deeply human habit, had licked a stray crumb of her mid-shift protein bar from her finger. Her finger, still carrying the ghost of that forbidden complex flavor, then brushed against a particularly curious larva. The larva, one of the smaller, more excitable ones the humans had affectionately dubbed Sparky, instantly stopped its usual frantic scuttling. Its multiple eye stalks swiveled, focusing intensely on Chen's finger. A low, insistent trill vibrated from its gelatinous form, escalating into a demanding chirp. Sparky pressed itself against Chen's hand, its small feeding orifice extending slightly, tasting the air. It wasn't hungry for nutrient paste. It craved something else. Something new. Chen, recognizing the pure, unfiltered curiosity of a toddler, blinked. "Oh, hey there, buddy. What's up?" She instinctively offered her empty finger, devoid of crumbs, but still carrying the lingering scent. Sparky's reaction was profound. It squirmed, trilled louder, and began to vibrate with an intensity that bordered on distress, pulling at her hand with surprising strength. It wasn't pain. It was a primal, undeniable Sliber craving. Sergeant Maya Ramirez, observing from a nearby station, saw the interaction. Her human intuition, finely honed by years of dealing with hungry, demanding offspring, kicked in. These Xylosian larvae, they weren't just biological machines. They were Tunchinapretes. And kids liked variety. They liked exploration. And they loved unrazzer treats. "All right, team," Maya announced, her voice conspiratorial. "New directive. We're going to try an enrichment exercise. Something textural. and maybe a little flavorful. She pulled out a small, sealed container. Inside were perfectly sterile, plain, dissolvable infant rice wafers, brought as an emergency snack for the human crew but never deployed until now. These were approved for human infants, utterly safe, but an alien concept to the Xylosians. "All right, Squiggle, open wide for a surprise," Staff Sergeant Miller chirped, offering a tiny piece of the wafer on the tip of his finger. The wafer was light, dry, and dissolved instantly on contact. Squiggle's eye stalks widened. Its trills changed, becoming a high-pitched, excited squeal. It tasted texture. It tasted something other than bland paste. The nursery exploded. The scent of the wafers, subtle to humans, was an intoxicating perfume to the larvae. They converged on the humans, a writhing, trilling mass of demanding curiosity. More, more. Their insistent movements seemed to scream. The humans, delighted by their ingenuity, carefully parceled out the tiny, dissolving treats, relishing the alien young's profound, visceral enjoyment. High progenitor Xylar watched the feeds, its core components freezing. The data streams showed unprecedented neural activity in the larvae. Dopamine spikes, a profound surge of sensory input. They were experiencing pleasure from food. Not just sustenance, but gratification. The concept was horrifying. Their offspring were developing taste buds, developing preferences, developing cravings. This was a step backward, a regression to some primitive, chaotic state of being that the Xylosians had long since evolved beyond. The Xylosian adults were now truly, utterly terrified. The humans hadn't just introduced games, they'd awakened a ghost in the machine, a forgotten craving for sensation and indulgence that threatened to unravel the very foundation of Xylosian discipline and order. They had given the future generation a taste of the wild, unpredictable world, and once a child tasted that kind of freedom, they would never again be content with the sterile, ordered existence their parents had planned for them. The Xylosian larval chambers had always been models of sterile efficiency. Smooth, curving surfaces designed for easy cleaning and gentle nutrient flow dominated the architecture. High progenitor Xylar had always been proud of the ingenious, gravity-neutral transfer tubes, perfectly frictionless conduits for moving larger larvae between developmental stages. They were the epitome of the perfect park for burgeoning Xylosian life, serene, controlled, and utterly predictable. Until the humans arrived. Sergeant Maya Ramirez surveyed the transfer tube entrance, a gleaming, wide aperture that dropped into a gentle, curving descent before leveling out into a receiving basin. "You know what that is?" she asked, a mischievous glint in her eyes turning to Specialist Chen and Staff Sergeant Miller. Miller's grin was immediate. "Oh, absolutely, Sarge. That's a slide. A really, really good slide." "Damn right it is," Chin agreed, already rummaging in her pack for the reinforced, self-adhesive padding they'd repurposed from a supply crate. "Looks like it'll give 'em a nice little whoosh. Safe too, frictionless," they said. The Xylosians had designed it for efficiency. The humans saw potential for pure, unadulterated fun. Carefully, Maya positioned herself at the entrance, kneeling. "All right, little guys, who wants to go for a ride?" Her voice, full of playful excitement, bounced off the polished walls. The larvae, having long since learned to associate human shouts with impending delight, converged. Sparky, the curious one, trilled eagerly, nudging Maya's hand. "You first, Sparky." Maya gently guided the gelatinous form to the edge of the tube. "Ready? 1, 2, 3, WEE." She gave a light push, and Sparky slid smoothly down the long, curving tube, its trills of surprise quickly morphing into delighted squeals as it splashed gently into the nutrient basin at the bottom. The other larvae lost their minds. A scramble ensued, a writhing, enthusiastic pile-up at the top of the slide. Miller and Chen quickly moved to manage the chaos, forming a makeshift queue. All right, single file, you little goobers. No pushing." Miller chuckled, guiding a particularly enthusiastic larva. "Your turn, Squiggle!" The Xylosian overseers, observing from their hidden analytical stations, were in collective shock. Their critical infrastructure, a marvel of bioengineering designed for seamless transit, was being used as a recreational device. The larvae, far from exhibiting fear or discomfort, were absolutely enraptured. Their developmental data screamed with unprecedented levels of dopamine, serotonin, and a host of other neurochemicals associated with joy and excitement. The Xylosians had always understood emotion on a theoretical level, but to see their young feel such raw, overwhelming delight from an act of pure, illogical play, it was terrifying. High progenitor Xylar watched as a line of its future citizens, one by one, were propelled down the frictionless tube, each one erupting in a chorus of joyous trills. The humans cheered them on, laughing, high-fiving the larvae with soft pads. This wasn't just a physical transformation of the nursery into a playground. This was an emotional, neurological rewiring of an entire generation. Humanity had not only adapted to the alien environment, they had conquered it with joy, turning sterile efficiency into exhilarating chaos. And the Xylosian adults, who valued order above all else, could only watch in horrified awe as their perfect, predictable children discovered the wild, irresistible joy of a simple slide. The Xylosian larval wards were built for the quiet hum of automated systems, the gentle ripple of nutrient baths, and the almost imperceptible trill of developing young. Every sound was accounted for, scheduled, predictable. An unscheduled laugh, a truly spontaneous burst of human joy, had never been factored into their pristine acoustic designs. Yet, it now echoed, sharp and clear, through the chambers. It started with Specialist Chen. She was attempting to teach a group of larvae a rudimentary game of follow the leader, leading them in a slow, undulating line across the nursery floor. One particularly agile larva, nicknamed Zippy, decided to interpret follow as dart unexpectedly between legs. Zippy threaded its way through Chen's feet, then, with a burst of mischievous trills, veered off course, directly towards Sergeant Maya Ramirez, who was trying to disentangle two other larvae from a soft, oversized block. Maya, caught off guard, stumbled slightly. Zippy, instead of recoiling, bumped playfully into her shin, then quickly tried to crawl up her leg, its gelatinous form squirming with what could only be described as playful intent. Maya let out a loud, unrestrained laugh. A real, honest-to-God human laugh, rich with surprise and genuine amusement. The effect was instantaneous. Zippy froze, its eye stalks quivering, its entire being focused on the sound. Then, with a jerky motion, it bumped Maya's shin again, emitting a small, hopeful trill. It wanted the sound back. It wanted the feeling that sound evoked. The other larvae, drawn by the unique frequency, began to converge, their trills questioning, curious. "Oh, you think that's funny, do you, little troublemaker?" Maya chuckled again, reaching down to gently scoop Zippy into her arms, cradling its surprisingly warm, soft body. Zippy vibrated against her, emitting a new sound, a soft, rumbling gurgle that vibrated in Maya's chest. It was a sound of pure contentment, of unadulterated pleasure. Staff Sergeant Miller and Private Jenkins, seeing the reaction, exchanged a glance. "He likes it, Sarge," Miller said, a wide smile spreading across his face. "He likes the giggles." Soon, the nursery was filled with human laughter. Playful hoots as a larva successfully navigated an improvised obstacle course. Exasperated chuckles when another tried to eat a non-edible toy. Loud, booming guffaws when Miller accidentally slipped on a stray puddle of nutrient paste, landing in a heap surrounded by delighted larvae. Each human laugh, each spontaneous burst of amusement, was a new, powerful stimulus for the Xylosian young. They didn't just hear it, they felt it, absorbed it, and began to crave it. High progenitor Xylar, monitoring the audio feeds, felt its neural pathways shorting out. Laughter. Unscheduled, unnecessary, and worst of all, contagious. The data showed that the larvae were now actively seeking situations that elicited human laughter. They were learning cause and effect, yes, but not of an academic nature. They were learning how to provoke joy. Their own trills, once predictable, were becoming more varied, more expressive, evolving to mimic the tonal qualities of human amusement. The Xylosian adults were no longer just terrified. They were in a state of existential panic. Their future generations, once paragons of solemn duty and logical progression, were learning to embrace chaos, to seek out joy, to express emotion with an abandon previously unheard of. The humans hadn't just introduced new games. They had introduced the concept of asterisk fun itself, a dangerous, unpredictable, deeply human force. And the Xylosian young, once blank slates, were rapidly becoming little echoes of humanity, filled with the boundless, boisterous spirit of their adopted parents. Once a child learned to laugh, truly and deeply, how could they ever return to a life devoid of such spontaneous, infectious joy? The silence fell like a physical weight, cold and absolute. One moment, the Xylosian larva wards buzzed with the familiar human cacophony, the gentle shouts of, "Who's a good little squiggler?" The trills of delighted larvae chasing a human-thrown ball. The next, the automated systems, under direct orders from high progenitor Xylar, had initiated a reintegration protocol. All human-introduced stimuli ceased. The colorful toys vanished, retracted into wall panels. The ambient lighting shifted back to a sterile, uniform glow. The carefully curated, vibrant chaos was replaced by the ghost of a forgotten memory, the cold, impersonal order the Xylosians had always known. Sergeant Maya Ramirez felt it instantly. The sudden, unnatural quiet was deafening. Her team, still mid-game with their charges, exchanged alarmed glances. "What the?" Staff Sergeant Miller muttered, his hand still poised to playfully bat a larva. The larvae themselves were the first to react. Their frantic, joyous trills sputtered, then died. Eye stalks, once darting playfully, now swiveled erratically, searching. Their gelatinous forms, so recently buoyant with excitement, began to slump. It was like watching the lights go out in a city, a sudden chilling power outage of pure, childish joy. Xylar, observing from its hidden console, registered the sudden drop in larval neurological activity. The reintegration was working. The abnormal dopamine spikes were receding. The unpredictable emotional fluctuations were smoothing out. This was good. This was control. This was a return to the pristine, predictable Xylosian development. But then, a different kind of activity began. A low, insistent hum emanated from the nursery floor. Not the cheerful trills, but a deep, resonant vibrato that spoke of distress. Sparky, the curious one, began to pulse with a faint, agitated glow. It wasn't seeking out a toy. It was seeking out a Smoim and Dorj. It squirmed across the floor, its movements no longer playful but desperate, directly towards Specialist Chen, who stood frozen, watching the sterile light return. "Hey, little guy, what's wrong?" Chen murmured, kneeling instinctively. Sparky pressed against her leg, its entire body quivering, emitting a sound that was less a trill and more a plaintive whine. It was looking for the warmth, the sound, the presence that had been abruptly snatched away. It was a cry for what it remembered, for what it craved. Miller saw it too. Several other larvae were beginning to emit similar distress sounds, bumping against the humans, trying to solicit a response. Their little feeding orifices extended not for food but for comfort. They weren't reacting to the absence of toys. They were reacting to the absence of asterisks them. The Xylosians had tried to delete the memory of chaos, of play, of warmth. But what they hadn't realized was that the humans themselves had become the memory. High progenitor Xylar's sensors registered a new, alarming trend. The larvae weren't reverting to their former passive state. They were entering a state of escalating psychological distress. Their biometrics were alarming. Heart rates spiking, internal fluid pressures fluctuating dangerously. The cold touch of the automated reset wasn't calming them. It was actively harming them. The Xylosian adults had tried to erase the human touch, to delete the messy, vibrant memories. But humanity, in its raw, undeniable impact, wasn't just a memory that could be deleted. It was a living, breathing, indelible imprint, one that the Xylosian young would literally wither without. The humans hadn't just babysat. They had become everything to these alien children, and now the adults were paying the terrifying price of that profound attachment. The air itself began to crackle, not with sound, but with a strange, almost physical static that prickled the humans' skin. It was the raw, unchanneled psionic feedback from hundreds of Xylosian larvae, now in full-blown emotional meltdown. The reintegration protocol had ripped away their human comfort, leaving an aching void. Their distress, usually a contained internal process for Xylosians, was now broadcasting like an open wound across the sterile nursery. It was the static of a forbidden quarrel, a silent scream against the enforced silence. Sergeant Maya Ramirez felt it like a headache blooming behind her eyes, a sharp, buzzing pressure. She watched in horror as the larvae, previously boisterous, now huddled in shivering masses. Their usually vibrant bioluminescence flickered erratically, dimming to a sickly pale hue. Some pulsed with agitated reds and purples, a direct visual display of their mental anguish. "They're in pain, Maya." Specialist Chen's voice was tight, her hands hovering helplessly over a group of whimpering larvae. "Their neural scans are off the charts. This protocol is killing them." Staff Sergeant Miller, usually quick with a joke, had gone grim. He was crouched, cradling Squiggle, who was vibrating so violently it felt like a tiny, distressed engine in his hands. "Hi, Progenitor Xyler, do you read me?" Miller's voice, projected to the unseen overseers, was sharp with concern, not deference. "Your larvae are in acute psychological distress. They are not calming down. They are panicking." The only response was a clipped, synthesized voice, devoid of emotion, emanating from the wall speaker. Asterisk. "The data indicates a return to baseline neurological activity. Your assessment is inaccurate, human. Continue to observe protocols." Maya slammed her fist against a nearby nutrient dispenser, the plastic groaning in protest. "Inaccurate? Look at them. This isn't baseline, this is collapse. They need us." Her voice, raw with human parental fury, cut through the buzzing static. Then, a new sound overlaid the psionic hum, the frantic chittering of Xylosian technicians in the observation booths, their own regulated, calm shattering. The static was beginning to affect the Xylosian control systems, causing minor fluctuations, disrupting their perfectly ordered readouts. The sheer intensity of the larvae's emotional outpouring was something the Xylosian technology had never been designed to handle. It was an uncontrolled, messy wave of pure feeling. One larva, Sparky, suddenly convulsed, its small form arching before going limp. Chen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Maya, we're losing them." That was it. Orders be damned. Protocols be damned. The sight of a child in distress, any child, was a universal trigger for humanity. Maya moved. "Forget the protocol. Team, move. Comfort them. Do whatever it takes." Miller immediately began to hum a silly tune, a familiar one the larvae had loved during airplane feeding. Chen started whispering soothing nonsense, gently stroking a trembling larva. Private Jenkins, tears blurring his vision, began to make soft, rhythmic thumping sounds with his hand on the padded floor, a game they called Earthquake Dance. The effect was not instantaneous, but it was undeniable. The frantic static lessened, ever so slightly. Sparky, with Miller's gentle song filling its immediate space, twitched, then pulsed a faint, relieved green. The other larvae, drawn by the familiar loving sounds and touches, began to gravitate towards the humans, clinging to them with desperate pseudopods. They were not seeking food, not seeking games, but seeking the undeniable warmth of a human presence. High Progenitor Xyler watched, paralyzed. The human intervention was working. The life signs of the larvae stabilized, then slowly improved. But the cost was immeasurable. The humans had directly defied orders, directly overridden Xylosian science, and their offspring were responding. The air in the Xylosian larval wards had taken on a new density. It wasn't just the sterile tang of synthesized dew anymore. It was the unseen, unyielding weight of expectation, an invisible pressure pressing down on the human crew. The Xylosians weren't yelling, not yet, but every automated nutrient dispenser hummed a little louder, every light pulse felt a little colder, and the silent, watchful eyes of remote surveillance drones seemed to multiply in the corners of the room. The path was being reset, and the humans were being subtly nudged back onto it. Sergeant Maya Ramirez felt it most keenly in the truncated playtimes. What had once been chaotic, joyous hours of invention were now strictly 15-minute windows, followed by automated sweeps that removed any lingering non-Xylosian-approved objects. Staff Sergeant Miller found himself whispering instructions for quiet tag or inventing games that required no props, just human ingenuity. "All right, little guys, secret whisper chase. Only the quietest trills allowed," he'd murmur, wiggling his fingers at a cluster of eager larvae. Specialist Chen noticed the increased presence of Xylosian developmental technicians. These multi-limbed, highly regulated beings would hover, observing the larvae with intense, unblinking ocular stalks. Sometimes, they'd even attempt to interact, mimicking a human gesture with an awkward, stilted precision. One technician, a designated observer for Sparky, tried to gently tap the larva with a long, segmented limb. The tap was too firm, too cold, and Sparky instantly recoiled, burrowing against Chen's leg with a plaintive squeak. "Easy there, buddy," Chen whispered, stroking Sparky's soft, gelatinous form. "They're just trying to learn." But it wasn't learning. It was an attempt to reclaim, to redirect the fervent attachment the larvae now displayed exclusively for the humans. The invisible pressure wasn't just on the humans, it was on the larvae too, trying to guide them back to a pristine, solitary existence that they now actively rejected. Private Jenkins, seeing the Xylosian technicians' awkward attempts, couldn't help but roll his eyes. "They really don't get it, do they?" he mumbled to Miller. "It's not just the sections, it's the heart behind it." The larvae confirmed this. When a Xylosian technician offered a nutrient gel packet with perfect, robotic precision, the larvae would consume it with minimal enthusiasm. But when Miller held out a scoop, made a silly nom-nom sound, and pretended it was a tiny spaceship landing, the larvae would attack it with gusto, trilling and vibrating with joy. They were choosing human interaction over sterile efficiency every single time. Their growing intelligence, once hailed by the Xylosians, was now being used to subtly subvert the very order their parents tried to impose. High progenitor Xyler, observing the failing reintegration efforts, felt a creeping dread. The humans weren't just persistent, they were irresistible. Their own children, the future pillars of Xylosian society, were actively resisting every attempt to return them to their natural, orderly path. They were, in essence, choosing a different kind of parental instinct. A messy, loud, gloriously unpredictable one. And the Xylosians, who had valued foresight and control above all else, found themselves utterly blindsided by the one thing they couldn't control, the wild, stubborn heart of a child that simply wanted to be loved. The Xylosian High Council had implemented new environmental controls, subtle at first, then increasingly overt. Automated partitions, shimmering and nearly transparent, would periodically rise, attempting to separate human caretakers from their charges. It was meant to create a gradual, gentle reacclimation, a slow drift back to the serene, solitary existence Xylosian larvae were designed for. But for the humans, it felt like chasing a horizon that never got closer. Every step they took towards normalcy, for the Xylosians, the larvae would pull them further away. Sergeant Maya Ramirez found herself constantly strategizing. "All right, partition coming up in 30 seconds. Team, spread out, establish visual contact, and initiate soothing vocalizations," she'd bark, like a commander preparing for a minor skirmish. As the shimmering wall slid into place, cutting off physical touch, Staff Sergeant Miller would immediately lean close, pressing his face to the translucent barrier. "Hey there, Squiggle. Can you still see me, buddy? Give me a trill if you can." On the other side, Squiggle, previously a whirl of activity, would immediately cease its movements, pressing its own gelatinous form against the partition, emitting a low, mournful trill. Its eye stalks, instead of darting to the automated, Xylosian-approved light patterns, remained fixed on Miller's blurry form. The Xylosians wanted a gradual separation. The larvae interpreted it as abandonment, and their distress metrics would spike, defying all Xylosian logic. Specialist Chen experienced a similar futility. Xylosian distraction drones, small, silent mechanical devices emitting soothing sonic frequencies and gentle light patterns, were deployed to engage the separated larvae. One drone hovered near Sparky, attempting to project a holographic image of a Xylosian elder. Sparky took one look, then purposefully ignored it, instead squirming to the nearest point of the partition to press against Chen's hand through the material. "They just don't care about the drones. Chen reported to Maya, a mix of exasperation and pride in her voice. They want us hot. They can tell the difference. It was a truth that echoed the Xylosians' deepest fears. Their technology, their elegant solutions, were meaningless in the face of a child's simple, unyielding attachment to a human. Private Jenkins, during one of these separation periods, observed a Xylosian developmental technician trying to entice a larva with a new, advanced nutrient gel dispenser. The technician followed every protocol, every precise movement. But the larva, its bioluminescence dim with disinterest, simply remained pressed against the partition, letting out soft, pleading trills. The moment the partition lifted, the larva surged past the technician, directly for Jenkins, clinging to his leg with an almost desperate intensity. High progenitor Xylar's internal processors whirred, attempting to reconcile the data. The larvae were not just resilient, they were stubbornly, inexplicably devoted. Every Xylosian attempt to reset the path, to return them to their natural, orderly development, only pushed them further into the arms of the humans. The horizon of a calm, controlled nursery seemed to recede with every cycle. The humans, with their chaotic warmth and undeniable love, weren't just babysitting. They had become the anchors of these alien children's entire universe, and the Xylosian adults were realizing, with a chilling certainty, that some bonds, once forged, could never be broken. The sterile sting of the autodoc's sensors chilled the air, sharp and metallic. This wasn't the vibrant, chaotic nursery. This was the Xylosian diagnostic chamber, a gleaming, impersonal space of chrome and pulsing light, where the larvae were brought for their standardized developmental assessments. Sergeant Maya Ramirez stood rigid, her jaw tight, watching as Staff Sergeant Miller tried to soothe a whimpering larva, Sparky, currently suspended in a magnetic field above the shimmering examination table. "Easy there, little guy," Miller murmured, his voice a low, steady rumble, even though he couldn't physically touch Sparky. "Just a quick checkup. Nothing to worry about." But Sparky was worried. Its gelatinous form was vibrating with a frenetic, fear-induced pulse. Its eye stalks were retracted, its bioluminescence dimming to a faint, terrified flicker. The autodoc's articulated arm, tipped with a cold, glowing probe, began its descent. As it neared, Sparky emitted a piercing, high-pitched shriek, a sound that tore at Maya's gut, a sound of pure, unadulterated fear. It was a sound no Xylosian larva was ever meant to make. High progenitor Xylar observed from the remote console, its optical sensors analyzing the anomalous vocalization. Asterisk. The larva is exhibiting heightened stress indicators. Proceed with calibration of soothing sonic emitters. Asterisk it in tone to its technicians. The chamber filled with a low, monotonous hum, designed to calm, but it only seemed to make Sparky shiver harder. It needed human warmth, not sterile sound waves. Specialist Chen, seeing Sparky's agony, took a step forward. "No! It's not working! It's scared! It needs comfort!" she yelled, her voice raw with protective instinct. She pressed her hand against the transparent barrier separating them from the autodoc, as if her touch could somehow reach the trembling larva. The autodoc's arm continued its slow, inexorable approach. Sparky thrashed, its small pseudopods flailing, desperately trying to escape the invisible hold. Its shrieks became ragged, pleading. Maya felt a primal fury ignite within her. This wasn't science. This was torture. This wasn't a diagnostic. It was a violation. "Stop the examination," Maya barked, her voice echoing with command. "That's an order, Xylar. You're terrifying them." Asterisk. "The procedure is within parameters, Sergeant Ramirez. Your emotional input is compromising objective assessment." Juban Sizier's synthesized voice replied, utterly devoid of understanding. But Maya didn't care about objective assessment. She saw a child in pain. Miller was practically vibrating with helpless anger, his hands clenched into fists. Private Jenkins, usually so cheerful, had gone pale, his gaze fixed on Sparky's suffering. This was their kid. This was a direct threat. As the probe was about to make contact, Maya moved. She slammed her hand against the emergency release panel, overriding Xylosian's safety protocols with a furious, human ingenuity. A hiss of air, a clunk, and the magnetic field holding Sparky flickered, dropping the whimpering larva into the padded basin below. The Silosian technicians gasped, their multi-limbed forms recoiling in shock. Maya didn't hesitate. She threw open the access hatch and was at Sparky's side in an instant, scooping the trembling larva into her arms. She held it close, rocking it gently, whispering soft, nonsensical reassurances. "Shh, it's okay, buddy. Mommy's got you. You're safe." Sparky, nestled against her chest, slowly stopped shaking. Its bioluminescence flared back to a soft, comforted green. It emitted a deep, rumbling trill, a sound of profound relief. High progenitor Xylar's screens flashed with critical errors, red warnings screaming across its objective data. The humans had not only defied direct orders, they had broken procedure, rescued a subject, and proven, irrevocably, that some wounds could only be healed by the warmth of a fierce, loving human heart. The cool, clinical glow of the diagnostic chamber still hummed with the echoes of Sparky's fear and Maya's defiant shout. High progenitor Xylar's primary optical stalks swiveled from the relieved, comforted larva in Maya's arms to the furious red diagnostic still screaming across its display. The numbers spoke of extreme distress, followed by a rapid, unprecedented recovery that coincided precisely with human physical contact and vocalizations. This was not a flawless procedure for Xylosian parameters. It was a chaotic intervention. Yet, the outcome was undeniably stable, even face-optimal. "Release the remaining subjects for reintegration into the nursery environment," Xylar's voice commanded, a flicker of its usual calm returning. The other larvae, still agitated by the autodoc's sterile presence, were gently herded back by the human team, clinging to them like barnacles to a ship. The sheer relief radiating from the larvae as they were reunited with their human caretakers was palpable, an invisible wave washing over the sterile room. Back in the nursery, the Xylosian technicians, under Xylar's increasingly frantic directives, attempted to apply a new stimulus module. It was a highly advanced holographic projector designed to simulate complex logical puzzles, the foundation of Xylosian higher thought. A shimmering, intricate geometric pattern materialized in the center of the room, requiring precise psionic manipulation to solve. The larvae, however, paid it no mind. Squiggle, the paste-spitting troublemaker, was currently engaged in a vigorous game of Chase the Light with Private Jenkins, who was using a repurposed laser pointer to send a red dot skittering across the floor. Sparky, still nestled close to Maya, peered over her arm, trilling contentedly. The logical puzzle, meant to captivate their developing minds, was simply ignored. Observe the larvae's engagement with the module. Xylar instructed a nearby technician, its voice tight with forced objectivity. The technician tried to gently guide a larva toward the holographic puzzle. The larva swiveled its eye stalks, gave the puzzle a dismissive flick of a pseudopod, and then darted off to join Staff Sergeant Miller, who was making ridiculous, bowing sounds as he bounced a soft, human-made ball. This was the terrifying cure. The humans hadn't just made the larvae happy, they'd made them resilient. The larvae now possessed an emotional robustness, a playful curiosity, and a sheer unwillingness to be bored by sterile logical exercises that defied all Xylosian developmental norms. They were no longer passive receptacles for knowledge. They were active, opinionated, joyful participants in their own growth, utterly immune to the Xylosians' attempts to force them onto a predictable path. High progenitor Xylar's processing core struggled. The larvae were not just healthy, they were flourishing. Their problem-solving abilities, when applied to human-invented games, were off the charts. Their social cohesion, focused entirely on the humans, was unprecedented. This was a flawless cure for any species seeking adaptable, resilient, emotionally intelligent young. But it was not Xylosian. The horrifying truth settled upon the Xylosian adults like a shroud. They had sought to instill parental instincts. Instead, they had introduced humanity itself into the core of their future. These children would not become detached, logical leaders. They would be joyful, unpredictable, and fiercely loyal. They would be, in essence, little humans in Xylosian form. And the perfection of this terrifying, irreversible transformation was the Xylosians' greatest nightmare. Humanity, without even trying, had not just saved their young, It had lovingly, chaotically, and irrevocably rewritten their species' destiny. The Xylosian Nightly Lullaby, a complex symphony of low-frequency pulses and ambient light shifts, began its cycle. It was designed to coax the larvae into a state of optimal rest, to ensure predictable growth and serene, solitary slumber. For countless cycles, it had worked flawlessly, a testament to Xylosian biosonic engineering. But tonight, there was a glitch. Not in the system's programming, but in the larvae themselves. Sergeant Maya Ramirez, on the quietest sector of the night shift, watched the thermal imaging. Instead of the steady, even blue of deep sleep, restless patches flickered. Small, agitated orange swirls indicated active movement. This wasn't calm. This was discomfort. Then she heard it. A faint, rhythmic thumping, barely audible above the Xylosian lullaby's drone. Thump thump, thump thump. It was Private Jenkins' earthquake dance, a gentle, comforting rhythm he'd tap on the padded floor, which the larvae loved. Now, several larvae were attempting to recreate it, bumping their gelatinous forms softly against the floor, in time with an internal memory. Others emitted soft, sustained trills, not these short, sharp bursts of play, but something longer, more melodic, something that sounded suspiciously like an alien attempt at human humming. Specialist Chen, observing from an adjacent console, leaned closer. "They're not sleeping, Sarge. They're restless." A knowing grin touched her lips. "They're trying to hum their own lullabies, or Jenkins' dance." The Xylosian lullaby continued its perfectly calibrated cycle, utterly oblivious to the subtle, defiant resistance of its charges. But the larvae knew. They sought a different kind of comfort, one burned into their developing minds by human touch, human sound, and human presence. They were trying to soothe themselves with echoes of their human parents. High progenitor Xylar's sensors, while registering the anomalous movements and vocalizations, categorized them as minor developmental irregularities. Its systems attempted to increase the soothing frequencies, to deepen the calming light, but the larvae only shifted, pressing against the inner walls of their enclosures, as if searching for a familiar hand to stroke their forms. They didn't need more Xylosian efficiency. They needed humanity. Maya felt a pang of profound understanding. These little blobs, these alien children, were homesick, not for a place, but for people. For the boisterous laughter, the gentle scolding, the warmth of a loving presence that disrupted all logical Xylosian order. Their parental instincts were so deeply imprinted that even the perfect, sterile lullaby of their own species was insufficient. "They need us, don't they?" Miller's voice, a soft murmur in the quiet, articulated the unspoken truth. He reached out, pressing his palm against the transparent barrier of a larva's enclosure. The larva, Squiggle, immediately gravitated towards it, pressing its own form against the material, its bioluminescence pulsing with a faint, hopeful green. It couldn't feel his touch, but it recognized the gesture. It recognized the love. The glitch in the nightly lullaby wasn't a system error. It was a heart-seeking connection, a memory fighting against forced forgetfulness. The Xylosians could control every frequency, every light wave, but they couldn't control the longing of a child's imprinted soul. And in that simple, heartbreaking defiance, humanity proved its true, enduring power, to make itself utterly, irrevocably essential. The Xylosian High Council chambers shimmered, with a tension far thicker than the regulated atmosphere. High progenitor Xylar's optical stalks swiveled across the faces of its peers, each displaying a spectrum of distress, from agitated bioluminescence to deep, worried retractions of sensory tendrils. The data projected onto the central display was unambiguous and utterly horrifying. The Xylosian larvae, their young, were deteriorating. Not physically, not in a way a Xylosian autodoc could fix, but mentally, emotionally. Their nightly cycles, once serene and predictable, were a constant battle against restlessness. Their curiosity, once channeled into logical puzzles, now expressed itself as an insatiable demand for human interaction. The attempts at reintegration and de-imprinting had only intensified their attachment, turning nascent affection into desperate need. The humans had not just cared for them, they had fundamentally rewired them. "The data is undeniable," Elder Krythe vocalized, its voice unusually strained. "Our young are rejecting their heritage. They are rejecting us. Their well-being is now inextricably linked to the presence of these humans. A visual feed flickered to life, showing the nursery. Sergeant Maya Ramirez was reading a human storybook, her voice a soft, rhythmic drone, surrounded by a pile of content, trilling larvae. Staff Sergeant Miller was teaching a group to gently stack soft, colorful blocks, while Specialist Chen made exaggerated, funny faces, eliciting bursts of alien giggles. The room was vibrant, loud, and utterly against every Xylosian principle of orderly development. Yet, the larvae, every single one, glowed with a healthy, vibrant green. Another feed showed the Xylosian developmental technicians attempting to engage larvae with automated stimuli. The larvae either ignored them entirely or actively recoiled, pressing themselves against the nursery walls, seeking the furthest point from the sterile, automated care. "We face a choice," Progenitor Xylar articulated, its voice low. "Continue the protocols and risk irreversible psychological damage, even death, to our future generation. Or embrace the disruption." The last word tasted like ash in its processing core. Embrace chaos. Embrace humanity. The chamber fell into a heavy, agonizing silence. This wasn't a choice between right and wrong, but between their cherished, logical future and an unpredictable, alien present. The weight of generations of a perfectly ordered society pressed down on them. Suddenly, a voice, surprisingly clear and devoid of its usual cheerful bluster, cut through the tension from the nursery feed. Private Jenkins. He was holding Squiggle, who had fallen asleep curled against his hand. "They just want to be loved, you know?" Jenkins' voice was quiet, earnest. "That's all kids really need." That simple, profoundly human truth hit the Xylosian Council harder than any data spike or threat analysis. Love. A concept they understood academically but had never truly integrated into their species' rearing process. They had seen it as inefficient, unpredictable, a variable best removed, but now that variable was the only thing sustaining their young. Xylar made its decision. It felt like tearing a limb from its own body, yet the image of the content larvae, glowing under human care, was a powerful, undeniable argument. "Cease all de-imprinting protocols," it commanded, its voice firm, though a subtle tremor ran through its optical stalks. "Redeploy human-approved stimuli. Authorize full, unrestricted interaction between human caretakers and larvae." A collective gasp, a ripple of silent dismay went through the council. This was surrender. This was an admission of their own biological inadequacy. But Xylar was unyielding and prepared to modify our societal structures. It continued, the full, terrifying implication of its choice sinking in. The Xylosian nursery hummed, not with automated calm, but with a new, unsettling vibrance. The automated partitions were gone, the sterile lights had softened, and a scattering of colorful, non-toxic toys now dotted the padded floor. High Progenitor Xylar stood near the viewing portal, its optical stalks constantly whirring, trying to reconcile the data streams with the chaotic reality unfolding before it. The council had made its decision. Humans were essential. But the sheer nessiness of their essentiality was still deeply unnerving. Sergeant Maya Ramirez, her voice a low, reassuring murmur, was gently guiding Squiggle through a soft fabric tunnel, eliciting delighted trills. Staff Sergeant Miller was making comical explosion noises as he helped Sparky stack large, squishy blocks into an unstable tower. The larvae were thriving. Their bioluminescence pulsed with vibrant, healthy hues. They were active, engaged, and utterly fixated on their human caretakers. Xylar watched, its internal sensors meticulously logging every interaction. The humans would often pat the larvae, a gentle, rhythmic thud against their gelatinous forms. They would nudge them playfully, or cup them in their hands for moments of quiet comfort. These were behaviors Xylosians had never employed. They were tactile, invasive. Yet, the larvae responded with clear indicators of profound contentment. One of the larvae, a smaller one Maya had dubbed Zippy, had just finished a successful crawl through an improvised maze. Zippy, flushed with accomplishment, darted directly towards Xylar, its eye stalks fixed on the large, imposing figure. Xylar's internal alarms gave a low-level thrum. Larvae did not approach uninvited. This was a direct breach of protocol. Before Xylar could process a countermeasure, Zippy reached its multi-limbed, powerful form. Zippy paused, its gelatinous body quivering. Then, with an almost perfect imitation of Staff Sergeant Miller's comforting gesture, it nudged Xylar's leg. A soft, unexpected hedge gyal sump against its chitinous plating. Xylar froze. The sensation was entirely foreign. Not a bump, not an accidental collision. This was deliberate. Its internal systems registered the gentle pressure, the slight yield of Zippy's form, and the subsequent soft, inquiring trill that followed. It was a request. A question. Did you feel that? Do you approve? Maya, seeing Zippy's bold move and Xylar's sudden rigidity, offered a soft explanation. He just wants a pat, progenitor. He's telling you he did a good job. A pat. Xylar's optical stalk swiveled from Zippy's expectant form to Maya, then back again. This small creature, its own progeny, was seeking a human-derived gesture of affirmation from Siddiq. The very concept was astounding. The touch was not painful, not hostile. It was warm, confident, affectionate, and utterly, terrifyingly human. Xylar's neural network churned. It understood the data, the psychological models, the behavioral imprinting, but the actual, physical sensation, the intent behind the alien touch, was a profound, unsettling shock. Humanity wasn't just influencing their young. It was subtly, irrevocably, reaching out and touching them. The adults were no longer safe behind their observation screens. The chaotic, loving imprint of humanity had become so powerful, so pervasive, that it was now spilling over, demanding a response from the very beings who feared it most. And in that soft, unexpected nudge, a new, frightening future for the Xylosian Empire began to unfold. High progenitor Xylar's internal processors still buzzed with the echo of Zippy's soft, demanding nudge. The sensation lingered, an unexpected warmth against its chitinous leg, a direct, unfiltered communication that bypassed all logical filters. Xylar was built for analysis, for order, for the predictable. This was neither. It was a raw, primal request for connection, learned directly from the humans. The chrome sky of Xylosian perfect order, once unblemished, now showed its first, terrifying crack. The other Xylosian developmental technicians, who had witnessed Zippy's audacity, shifted uncomfortably, their optical stalks swiveling between the bold larva, the rigid progenitor, and the amused humans. They were waiting for a directive, an ordered response to this unprecedented breach of decorum. But Xylar for a long moment offered none. It was processing. And that processing was agonizingly, disturbingly human. Sergeant Maya Ramirez, ever observant, saw the internal struggle playing out on the alien's impassive form. "He's still waiting, progenitor," she said softly, encouragingly. "He wants to know you saw him. He wants praise." Praise. For a simple nudge. For exhibiting an utterly non-Xylosian behavior. The concept was absurd. Yet Zippy remained. Unmoving. Its multifaceted eye stalks fixed on Xylar, with an almost childish expectation. This wasn't merely about the larvae. This was about the adults. About their ability to adapt to a new chaotic reality that was being forced upon them by their own offspring. With a shuddering internal whir, Xylar slowly, deliberately, lowered one of its primary manipulators. It was an awkward, jerky motion, unaccustomed to such imprecise, emotive interaction. It hesitated, its multi-jointed limb hovering just above Zippy's gelatinous form. The small larva's bioluminescence pulsed with anticipation. Then, with a gentle, hesitant tap, Xylar made contact. Thump. Not a comforting human pat, not yet, but a clear, acknowledged touch. Zippy's trills erupted, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that cut through the sterile air, followed by a surge of vibrant green from its bioluminescence. It then wriggled around Xylar's leg, a clear gesture of affection, before darting back to the human playing field. The effect on the other Xylosian adults was immediate and profound. A ripple of nervous, almost fearful energy spread through the observation teams. Their progenitor, the epitome of Xylosian self-control, had responded to a purely emotional human-derived plea from one of its young. The cracks were widening. Later, Staff Sergeant Miller found himself approached by a different larva, Squiggle, who emitted a series of rapid-fire trills, a sound pattern Miller now recognized as a request for airplane food. But this time, Squiggle wasn't looking at Miller. It was looking at a nearby Xylosian technician, then back at Miller, trilling expectantly. It was mediating. It was trying to teach its biological parent how to play. The technician, its internal systems undoubtedly redlining with alarm, looked from Squiggle to Miller, then to the nutrient gel in its own automated dispenser. It was frozen, caught between millennia of protocol and the undeniable demanding presence of a child who wanted a choo-choo train of paste, not bland efficiency. High progenitor Xylar, observing these interactions, felt a chilling certainty. The humans had not only altered their young, they had, by extension, begun to alter them. The adults were now forced to confront the chaotic, beautiful, terrifying reality of human parental instincts, not just as an abstract concept, but as a living, breathing force demanding a response. The chrome sky, once a symbol of their perfect, detached society, was now irrevocably shattered, letting in the wild, unpredictable light of a human-influenced dawn. Humanity didn't just adapt, it reshaped the world, and every living thing in it, simply by being itself. The Xylosian council chambers were, for once, utterly silent, not with the usual dignified calm, but with a stifling, unfamiliar tension. High progenitor Xylar stood before the assembled elders, the weight of their species' future pressing down. The humans, it had been decided, would remain. Their parental instincts were undeniable, and the larvae thrived under their chaotic care. But the Xylosian adults struggled. Every day was a stark, brutal lesson in their own emotional inadequacy. Xylar's optical stalk swiveled to the main display, showing the nursery feeds. Sergeant Maya Ramirez was playing a new game, Bubble Chase, blowing iridescent spheres that floated gently through the air. The larvae, trilling with delight, bounced and jiggled, trying to pop them. It was pure, unadulterated joy. A single larva, Sparky, misjudged a leap, bumping hard against a wall panel. A sharp, distressed trill cut through the cheerful noise. Maya was there in an instant. Her strong, warm hands scooped Sparky up, cradling its trembling form. "Oh, sweetie, are you okay? That was a big bump, wasn't it?" Her voice was a low, soothing murmur, entirely focused. She didn't check diagnostics, didn't initiate a scan. She simply held the larva close, her thumbs gently stroking its gelatinous surface. Sparky, still quivering, pressed against Maya's chest, its bioluminescence fading from agitated red to a soft, comforted green. It wasn't just physical contact. It was a transfer of calm, of empathy. Maya murmured soft, nonsensical reassurances, the kind only a parent offers a hurt child. "It's all right, my little brave one. Just a little ouchie. See? All better now." Xylar watched, its internal systems meticulously processing. The larva's stress hormones spiked, then plummeted. Its neural activity, previously erratic, stabilized with astonishing speed. It was not the cold, efficient Xylosian autodoc that healed. It was the messy, human touch. The unconditional empathy. Suddenly, Xylar felt an unprecedented physiological response. A sensation entirely foreign to its highly regulated biology. A sharp, unexpected stinging behind its primary optical stalks. A moisture, cool and unwelcome, began to well. Its neural network frantically tried to identify the anomaly. There was no protocol for this, no function. Then, a single, unbidden drop coalesced, tracing a burning path down its chitinous cheek. It tasted salty, unprogrammed, utterly, terrifyingly human. Xylar recoiled internally. A tear. Its processors screamed the word. A tear, a physiological display of profound, overwhelming emotion. It was witnessing the raw, visceral love of a human, and the absolute, trusting devotion of its own young, and in that moment, the sterile efficiency of its entire existence felt hollow, painfully empty. It was not just the larvae who were changing. The humans were reaching deeper, touching the very core of their observers. And Xylar, the epitome of Zalosian logic, had just cried. The salty taste lingered on high progenitor Xylar's optical stalks, an uninvited, unprogrammed residue that defied every known physiological algorithm. The sensation had passed, but the implication of it, the profound emotional core of its species, greatest leader shedding and unscheduled tear, remained. Where once complex data matrices and logical extrapolations would have filled the void, now there was a bewildering silence, a blank space in Xylar's processing, where an algorithm should have been. Xylar shifted its gaze to the nursery feeds, its analytical functions still attempting to categorize the anomaly it had experienced. Sergeant Maya Ramirez was now orchestrating a parade, leading a line of trilling, wiggling larvae, each carrying a soft, colorful banner. Staff Sergeant Miller provided drumroll sound effects with his hands, while Specialist Chen blew more iridescent bubbles, creating a joyous, chaotic procession. The vibrancy, the noise, the sheer unpredictability of it all was a stark counterpoint to Xylar's internal turmoil. It was the larvae who broke through Xylar's analytical paralysis. Squiggle, the paste-spitting imp, saw Xylar observing. It broke from the parade line, dragging its banner, and scuttled directly to the viewing portal. It pressed its gelatinous form against the transparent barrier, looking not at the humans, but directly at Xylar. Then, with a series of urgent, insistent trills, Squiggle deliberately dropped its banner. It waited, eye stalks fixed. The message was clear, burned into its nascent consciousness by weeks of human care. I dropped it. Help me. Show me you care. Maya, observing Squiggle's direct appeal to the unseen Xylosian, offered a soft, guiding murmur to the barrier. He needs you to pick it up, progenitor. He wants to know you see his effort. Pick it up. A simple action, yet one fraught with alien complexity. Xylar's system scanned for protocols, for algorithms for such an interaction. There were none. Only the echoing silence where cold logic had always been. Its primary manipulators, usually reserved for intricate data interfaces or ceremonial gestures, felt heavy, clumsy. But then, the image of Sparky, comforted in Maya's arms, flashed through Xylar's memory, the sensation of the unprogrammed tear. The choice, suddenly, was no longer logical. It was visceral. With a deep internal tremor, Xylar activated the automated external grabber arm, typically used for sterile collection, but instead of its usual swift, efficient motion, Xylar guided it with a hesitant, almost clumsy slowness. The metallic arm reached, paused, and then, with deliberate gentleness, scooped up Squiggle's small, soft banner. It presented it back to the larva through a small, designated return slot. Squiggle's trills exploded with triumph. It snatched its banner, pulsed with a vibrant green, and then, in an act that shocked Xylar to its core, it bumped its head against the return slot. A soft thump of gratitude, directly to Xylar. The contact, though indirect, was undeniable. Maya, seeing the interaction, offered a quiet smile. See, progenitor, you did great. He felt that. The Xylosian Council, watching this unprecedented interaction unfold on their own hidden feeds, maintained a stunned silence. Their progenitor had not only responded to emotional cues, it had done so with a deliberate, gentle touch. The chrome sky had not merely cracked, it had fundamentally shifted. High progenitor Xylar felt a profound, unsettling clarity. Humanity hadn't just changed their young. It had introduced a new way of existing, a new way of leading, filled with messy emotions, unpredictable love, and the terrifying, beautiful realization that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in what you compute, but in what you feel. The Xylosian larval wards had always maintained an air of pristine, processed perfection. Every molecule filtered, every trace element calibrated, every scent neutralized. It was a testament to Xylosian environmental engineering, a closed system designed to eliminate all unpredictability. But then, Staff Sergeant Miller, with a human's casual disregard for sterile purity, decided a fresh-baked Earth-standard cookie, a carefully smuggled, individually wrapped, non-allergenic treat, might just brighten his own day. And perhaps, subtly, the nursery too. The moment Miller peeled back the wrapper, a subtle, complex aroma wafted through the supposedly sealed environment. For Miller, It was the comforting scent of synthesized vanilla and cinnamon. For high progenitor Xylar, observing from its console, it was a sudden, alarming influx of asterisk unfiltered air. Its internal sensors flared, registering countless volatile organic compounds, utterly alien and unscheduled. It was a sharp intake of pure, raw chaos. In the nursery, the larvae reacted first. Sparky, the curious one, stopped mid-trill during a game of red light, green light. Its multiple eye stalks swiveled, twitching, tasting the air. A low, insistent hum vibrated from its gelatinous form. It wasn't distress, but a profound, almost primal curiosity. Squiggle, the paste-spitting imp, abandoned its attempts to climb Private Jenkins' leg, instead darting towards Miller with an excited, demanding series of chirps. "Whoa there, little buddy." Miller chuckled, quickly rewrapping his cookie. He knew the Xylosians were particular about environmental contamination. But it was too late. The ghost of the cookie's scent had already done its work. The larvae converged on Miller, their movements no longer driven by play but by an insistent, sensory demand. They nudged his leg, trilled at his hand, their small feeding orifices extending, not for nutrient paste, but for the complex, intoxicating smell that had briefly permeated their sterile world. They were experiencing a sensory awakening. They wanted Nimes more, Bonder. Specialist Chen, seeing the larvae's profound reaction, felt a surge of pride. "They like it, Sarge," she whispered to Maya, a knowing grin on her face. "They can smell it. They want whatever that is." Maya nodded, her eyes fixed on Xylar's observation portal. The alien progenitor was still rigid, its optical stalks whirring furiously, trying to process the data from its malfunctioning environmental controls. It was witnessing an unseen, undetectable force completely derail its perfectly ordered system. Xylar's internal logs were screaming. Oxygen levels within acceptable parameters, nutrient composition stable, atmospheric pressure nominal. Yet the larvae's neurological activity was spiking with unprecedented pleasure, their sensory organs overwhelmed by the rich, complex input. This was not a physical threat. This was something far more insidious. It was an aesthetic assault, an emotional contagion. Miller, feeling the persistent nudges, finally, cautiously, offered a sealed corner of the cookie wrapper for the larvae to sniff. Sparky and Squiggle pressed against it, quivering with delight, their trills now a continuous happy murmur. They weren't just eating or playing, they were experiencing Mefrembox. The Xylosian High Council, alerted by Xylar's frantic internal reports, began to transmit urgent queries. Asterisk, explain the sensory anomaly, quantify the emotional response. What is the nature of this smell? Xylar, its own systems, struggling with the sheer illogicality of the event, could only project the raw data, profound larval happiness, an unprecedented neurological activation, all triggered by a simple, invisible molecule. Humanity hadn't just introduced games and touch. They had introduced the messy, beautiful, overwhelming richness of sensory experience, a wildness that permeated the very air. The lingering ghost of the cookie's scent had done its work. The Xylosian larvae, once content with their sterile, predictable world, now buzzed with an insatiable sensory hunger. High progenitor Xylar, observing the nursery, felt a strange, beautiful ache in its own processing core, a feeling it could only attribute to a nascent understanding of loss. Loss of a future it had meticulously planned, replaced by a chaotic, vibrant one it couldn't possibly control. Sergeant Maya Ramirez watched her crew. Staff Sergeant Miller was now carefully allowing each larva a tiny sniff of the still-wrapped cookie, eliciting trills of pure, unadulterated bliss. Specialist Chen was leading a group in a quiet game of Find the Hidden Scent, using a drop of human-approved, non-toxic lavender oil on a cloth. The larvae were learning, evolving, demanding. Xylar's internal monitors projected the Xylosian developmental trajectory, a smooth, predictable curve of logic and measured growth, leading to a perfectly ordered, dispassionate adulthood. Beside it, the new larval data screamed, jagged spikes of emotional intensity, bursts of unpredictable creativity, and a profound, unwavering attachment to the messy, loving chaos of humanity. The future, once a clear path, was now an unwritten canvas, painted with vibrant human colors. They're never going back, are they? Private Jenkins murmured to Maya, his gaze sweeping over the joyful, trilling larvae. He wasn't asking a question. He was stating a truth. Maya shook her head, a soft smile on her face. No, Jenks, they're not. They've tasted joy, they've felt love. And once you do that, you can't undo it. Xylar, listening to the human's words through its translation matrix, felt the impact of that simple truth resonate deep within its core. Cannot undo it. The terrifying inevitability. The humans had not just babysat a generation, they had reshaped its very soul. These future Xylosian leaders would remember the scent of a cookie, the warmth of a human touch, the sound of laughter. They would value empathy over pure logic, connection over isolation, and joyous chaos over sterile order. The Xylosian High Council, observing from their own distant chambers, was in a state of unprecedented deliberation. Their species, evolution, had been hijacked, not by force, but by affection. They saw their children thriving, yes, but thriving in a way that was fundamentally secher and berar to them. It was a beautiful ache. The ache of realizing that the future you had meticulously crafted was being rewritten, page by page, by a species that simply refused to be predictable. Xylar's optical stalks swiveled from the joyful larvae to the human team, then to the blank, unwritten future trajectory on its display. There was no algorithm for this, no protocol, only the profound, terrifying, and undeniably beautiful uncertainty of a path forged not by cold logic but by the fierce, messy, unyielding heart of humanity. Humanity, with its chaotic compassion, its boundless capacity for joy, and its sheer, stubborn refusal to conform, had not just saved an alien species from decline. It had inadvertently, undeniably, and irrevocably taught them how to live. And the Xylosian adults, once terrified, now felt a strange, bittersweet awe. They had glimpsed an unwritten future, a future where their children would lead, not with stoicism but with heart. And in that moment, the terrifying became beautiful, and the aliens understood, perhaps for the first time, why humans were truly something to behold.